The sound is the first warning, an alarm shrieking down a concrete hallway. Doors slam, radios crackle, boots pound on the floor. Inside a prison, violence doesn't give you a warning label. It just explodes. Sometimes it's two inmates fighting in the yard, fists turning into shanks, the crowd roaring like an arena. Sometimes it's a guard dragged into a cell block, outnumbered, the line between order and chaos snapping in seconds. And sometimes it's the guards themselves, the ones in uniform, using fists, boots, or batons when control turns into punishment. July 2022, USP Lee, Virginia. An inmate is shackled at wrists and ankles. Guards move in. What happens next isn't procedure. He's beaten with rifle butts, kicked with steel-toed boots, left with broken ribs. Hours later, he can barely breathe. December 2024, Marcy Correctional, New York. In a medical exam room, a handcuffed man named Robert Brooks is punched, stomped, beaten by multiple officers.
A fail-safe override captured what they thought the world would never see.
The cameras don't see. By the time the truth surfaces, Brooks is dead. Texas, Caulfield unit. Guards beat an inmate so badly he's left in the hospital, maybe for life. Reports say understaffed shifts, little training, and a culture of fear let violence spiral out of control. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't a riot scene cut for entertainment. This is real. And the question is brutal. When violence erupts behind prison walls, how do guards respond? What tools do they use to hold the line? And when those tools fail or go too far, what does it reveal about a system built on control? Tonight, we're stepping inside that world. The hidden war between order and chaos, between restraint and brutality. This is how prison guards deal with violence. Prisons are pressure cookers. Every hallway, every yard, every locked cell is filled with tension just waiting for a spark. And for the people wearing uniforms, that spark can come at any second. Violence in prison isn't just one thing. It comes in different shapes, at different scales. Some of it is quick, a fist fight over a cigarette debt. Some of it is premeditated, a boiling pot of oil waiting to be thrown on a guard. And sometimes it's chaos, whole blocks erupting, alarms blaring, the line between guard and hostage disappearing in seconds. The first kind is inmate-on-inmate violence. The fights that break out in the yard, in the cafeteria, in the showers. It can be about gangs, money, race, or sometimes just boredom. Guards see it all.
Pull your hands in that cell. Officer Grant, strike him at the time.
Two guys exchanging punches over a poker debt can escalate into 10 men with shanks in under a minute. And the guards? They have to step into it. No pause button, no second take. If they hesitate, someone bleeds out. If they go in too hard, they're accused of brutality. It's a knife edge. Then there's violence aimed directly at guards. Inmates who've had enough. Inmates who want to make a statement. Inmates who just want to hurt the people in charge. Guards have been with sharpened toothbrushes, had boiling water and oil thrown at them, been ambushed in stairwells. At HMP Franklin in the UK, a convicted terrorist used kitchen tools and boiling oil to attack 3 officers, leaving them hospitalized. One moment, it's routine kitchen duty. The next, it's survival. And then there are riots, the nightmare scenario. Hundreds of men against a handful of staff. The air fills with smoke, doors are smashed off their hinges, and the prison becomes a war zone. Guards can be taken hostage, beaten, killed. In the 1980 New Mexico riot, dozens of inmates were slaughtered, guards overwhelmed, the prison turned into something out of hell. For the officers trapped inside, it was a living apocalypse. But not all violence is loud. Some of it hides in the shadows. Infirmaries, medical rooms, places where cameras don't reach. That's where Robert Brooks was beaten by officers in New York, handcuffed and defenseless. He didn't walk out alive. Violence in these spaces isn't about losing control, it's about abusing it. Guards know those corners exist, and sometimes they're the most dangerous of all. For prison officers, violence is never abstract. It's not maybe. It's a constant living possibility. The job isn't just watching inmates, it's surviving them. And every shift, they step into a place where the rules can flip in seconds, where the people you're guarding can become the people trying to kill you. The sound of violence in prison is unforgettable. A door slamming, a sudden shout, the scrape of boots on concrete. For most guards, every shift carries that risk that the routine will fracture and everything will descend into chaos. In December of 2024, that chaos took a man's life.
Okay, anything we're carrying with us has to go there, and then there's a body.
Robert Brooks was an inmate at Marcy Correctional Facility in New York. He was handcuffed, under guard, escorted into what was supposed to be a place of safety, the infirmary exam room. What happened inside was caught on camera. Several officers surrounded him. In seconds, fists flew, boots slammed into his body, and Brooks went down. He never got back up. The official story claimed he resisted. The footage showed something else, a cuffed man beaten until he was lifeless. 13 officers were charged, 1 pled guilty. For the rest, the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn. For the public, it was shocking. For guards, it was a reminder of the thin line they walk. Violence doesn't only come at them, sometimes it comes from them. But other times, the danger is sudden and one-sided. At HMP Frankland, one of the UK's most notorious high-security prisons, guards faced a nightmare they could not have predicted. Among the inmates was Hashem Abedi, the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. In May 2020, Abedi and another prisoner turned a kitchen into a battlefield. With boiling oil and improvised knives carved from baking trays, they launched a premeditated attack on staff. 3 officers ended up in the hospital, burned, stabbed, bleeding. It wasn't rage in the moment, it was calculated. The very tools of daily life, hot oil and kitchen trays, had been transformed into weapons.
It's limited to just 30 minutes a day. The other 23 and a half hours.
Guards walked into work that day expecting routine. They left scarred, both physically and mentally. For sheer scale, nothing compares to the New Mexico riot of 1980. The prison was overcrowded, understaffed, and seething with resentment. At dawn on February 2nd, inmates overpowered the guards, seizing control of the facility. In a matter of hours, the penitentiary descended into a nightmare. Guards were taken hostage, beaten, paraded through cell blocks. Inmates turned on each other with unimaginable brutality. Power tools, torches, knives, weapons created from whatever they could get their hands on. When order was finally restored after 36 hours, the numbers were staggering. 33 inmates dead, a dozen guards badly injured, an entire prison left looking like a war zone. For the officers caught inside, it wasn't a job anymore, it was survival. Some never returned to duty, others carried the trauma for the rest of their lives. Not all violence is loud, some of it festers quietly, hidden from sight. In County Durham, England, Medemsley Detention Center became the site of decades of systemic abuse. From the 1960s to the 1980s, officers terrorized boys as young as 14. Beatings, assaults, humiliations carried out not in riots or ambushes, but in the silence of locked rooms. Hundreds of victims came forward decades later, their lives permanently scarred. For years, guards at Medemsley carried out violence not as a response, but as a practice. It was institutional. Ordinary uniforms hiding extraordinary cruelty. When the scandal broke, the world saw another side of prison violence. Not chaos, but control. Not sudden, but sustained. In Ireland, the crisis took another form. As assaults on staff doubled in just 5 years, prison officers found themselves facing a rising tide of violence. Boiling water attacks, ambushes in stairwells, knives fashioned out of scrap metal.
From the conversations we have and the observations we make to the cells.
By 2023, the government authorized officers to carry pepper spray. For decades, the idea had been resisted, a weapon that could easily blur the line between defense and punishment. But by then, guards were being injured too often, too badly to ignore. Pepper spray became the last resort, a chemical wall between life and death in narrow corridors where fists and blades flew with terrifying speed. And then, there's the violence no one sees unless someone talks. At USP Lee, a federal prison in Virginia, multiple inmates reported being beaten and threatened by guards themselves. Stories of men being restrained, then assaulted. Of control being used as cover for retaliation. These weren't riots or ambushes, they were deliberate punishments carried out in corners of the prison where oversight was weakest. Guards insisted they were maintaining order. Inmates said they were victims. The truth may never be fully known, but the allegations painted a grim picture. In some prisons, the line between law enforcement and lawless brutality is paper thin. Together, these stories paint a picture more disturbing than any Hollywood movie could capture. A handcuffed man beaten to death in a medical room. Officers burned by boiling oil in a kitchen ambush. A full prison turned into a war zone where guards were dragged and beaten like trophies.
We are about to see the worst of the worst.
Boys abused for decades by the very men sworn to supervise them. Staff given chemical weapons just to make it through their shifts. And guards accused of turning violence into routine behind closed doors. For the people who wear the uniform, these are not isolated nightmares. They're possibilities waiting in every shift. Violence can come from the inmate who's been stewing for weeks. It can come from an overcrowded cell block ready to ignite. It can come from the guard standing next to you who decides to take his power too far. Every prison officer lives in that tension. Every moment of calm can shatter. And when it does, the question isn't whether violence happens, it's how it's handled. Do officers de-escalate? Do they fight back? Do they cross a line? Each case tells us something different, but they all lead back to the same truth. In the world of prisons, violence isn't the exception. It's the atmosphere everyone breathes. When violence erupts in a prison, the difference between life and death often comes down to how the guards respond. It's not as simple as stop the fight.
Why don't you wear a mask?
Inside those walls, every choice is a gamble. Step in too fast and you get stabbed, wait too long and someone bleeds out. Every move is watched, recorded, judged. One wrong step, and the system calls you a monster. One hesitation, and your colleagues call you a coward. Most responses begin with the body. Guards are trained to use their presence, the stance, the voice, the way they move, shouting commands, stepping forward, trying to break the spell of chaos before it ignites. De-escalation is drilled into them, at least on paper. Separate the combatants, show authority, calm the crowd. But in practice, when two men are trading blows with shanks in their fists, words don't always carry weight. That's when force enters the equation. Batons, handcuffs, shields, guards are taught to immobilize, not kill. But the space is tight, the crowds are large, and the adrenaline is surging. Inmates don't fight clean, they don't fight fair, they grab, they claw. They use hidden blades carved from toothbrushes or smuggled metal. For guards, responding to that kind of violence means putting themselves directly into harm's way. Many bear scars, knife wounds across the forearm, broken noses, burns from boiling water. In some prisons, pepper spray has become the frontline weapon. A cloud of chemicals can drop a fight in seconds, blinding, burning, choking. It's fast, effective, and far less lethal than a bullet. But it's also controversial. Once the spray fills the air, everyone in range suffers: guards, inmates, bystanders. And in the hands of the wrong officer, it becomes a tool of humiliation rather than defense. Then there are the riot responses. When dozens or hundreds of men surge together, a single guard's presence is useless. This is when the goon squads arrive, tactical teams in riot gear, shields locked, batons raised, sometimes armed with rubber bullets and tear gas. They move in formation like soldiers, sweeping through corridors, forcing inmates to the ground, reclaiming territory inch by inch. The goal is to overwhelm by sheer force, to remind the prisoners who controls the walls. But riot squads aren't just muscle, they're trained for surgical extractions too. Imagine a prisoner barricaded in a cell, refusing to come out, threatening violence. A tactical team moves in, shield first, flooding the space with light, force, and precision. In seconds, the inmate is pinned, cuffed, dragged out. On the report, it's use of force. In reality, it feels like war. Some prisons have gone high-tech. Cameras now watch every corridor. Body cams are strapped to guards. Drones patrol open yards. The idea is accountability proof of what really happens when violence breaks out. But cameras don't stop fists or knives. They just record them. And sometimes they catch what guards don't want seen. Retaliation beatings, excessive force, violence that comes not from inmates, but from the people in uniform. There's also the hidden response, the unwritten rules. Guards will tell you that sometimes official policy isn't enough. That in certain prisons, when an inmate attacks staff, the retaliation is swift and unrecorded. The lights go dim, cameras suddenly malfunction. The inmate comes out of the infirmary bruised and broken. Officially, it's written as resisted. Unofficially, it's a warning to everyone else. These are the shadows of prison life, the responses that never make it to the rulebook but live in the culture of corrections. And yet, for all the gear, the drills, the tactics, guards know something most people don't. You can't control a prison with force alone.
There are so many of them.
Every baton swing, every pepper spray canister, every riot squad raid leaves an echo. Inmates don't forget. Violence breeds violence. For every guard who steps into a fight, there's another guard who tries to prevent one. The smart officers build relationships, earn respect, trade small concessions for peace. A guard who knows how to talk can sometimes stop a riot before it begins. A guard who only knows how to hit might win the moment, but lose the block. Still, there are times when no amount of talking works. The guard who walks into a cell to deliver food and ends up ambushed with boiling water doesn't have the luxury of calm negotiation. The officer who sees two gang rivals stabbing each other in the yard doesn't have time for speeches. They have seconds to act, to drag bodies apart, to keep someone from dying. The margin is razor thin, and the aftermath is always messy. Investigations, lawsuits, accusations of brutality. Behind every response is another question. How much force is too much? Guards live in that gray area every day. Step back and people say you're weak. Step forward too hard and people say you're cruel. The uniform doesn't protect you from that dilemma. It only makes the stakes higher. And maybe the most brutal truth is this: no training, no equipment, no tactic ever makes a prison truly safe. Guards know it. Inmates know it. Violence is always there, waiting, hiding in the routine. A meal delivery, a kitchen shift, a medical checkup. Any moment can turn. And when it does, guards respond the only way they can, with their bodies, their voices, their weapons, and the hope that this time, they'll make it out alive. When the violence ends, the doors lock again. The floor gets mopped, the reports get written. To the outside world, the incident is over.
Constantly being observed. I think this is one of the hardest things.
But for the guards, it's never really over. Every officer carries the job home. The shouts echo in their heads at night. The smell of pepper spray clings to their clothes. Some wake up sweating, convinced they're still in that corridor, still being rushed by a man with a blade. PTSD isn't just for soldiers on battlefields, it's for prison guards too, because the battlefield is inside the walls. The stress is relentless. Guards walk into work knowing they could be attacked at any moment. That paranoia seeps into everything. They scan strangers in grocery stores, sit facing doors in restaurants, snap awake at the sound of footsteps behind them. Family members say they change shorter tempers, heavier drinking, more silence at the dinner table. The violence follows them home like a shadow. And then there's the culture of toughness. Guards are told not to show weakness, not to ask for help. You get stabbed, you walk it off. You get burned with boiling water, you come back to work. Trauma builds like scar tissue, layer after layer, until some break under the weight. High rates of depression, substance abuse, even suicide plague correctional officers. The uniform is heavy long after it's taken off. The job warps identity. Guards learn to see the world through suspicion. Inmates aren't people, they're threats. Colleagues aren't just co-workers, they're the only ones who understand. The prison becomes not just a place of work, but a mindset, a constant state of alert, fight or flight on repeat. And that takes a piece of the human underneath. The public doesn't see this. They see brutality in headlines, lawsuits, scandals. They don't see the nightmares, the marriages falling apart, the quiet drinking alone. Violence doesn't stop when the shift ends, it lingers. And for many prison guards, the hardest part of the job isn't surviving the violence inside, it's surviving what it does to them outside. What you've just seen isn't a movie. It's the reality guards live with every single day. Violence, chaos, and choices no one outside these walls ever has to make. If this opened your eyes, hit that like button. Share it with someone who still thinks prison is just slop and steel bars. And don't forget to subscribe because there are more stories behind these walls, darker, stranger, and more human than anything Hollywood ever imagined.